Imagine standing in the middle of a vast, bustling marketplace. Voices shouting, music playing, lights flashing in every direction. It is overwhelming, chaotic, and distracting. This is the state of your mind when left uncontrolled, pulled in every direction by thoughts, emotions, and external noise. But what if you could silence it? What if, in the middle of the chaos, you could remain still, fully aware, fully present, fully in control? Attention is the most valuable resource you possess, yet most people spend their lives unaware of its true power. It is the force that shapes perception, dictates reality, and determines the direction of one's life. Wherever attention is placed, energy flows, and from that energy, experience is born. It is not external circumstances that mold existence, but the silent choice of what one chooses to focus on. Consider for a moment the nature of awareness. The mind is like a vast open sky, and thoughts are passing clouds. Most people become entangled in these clouds, identifying with each one as if it defines them. A fleeting worry turns into a deep fear. A passing doubt becomes a paralyzing belief. Yet if one steps back and observes, it becomes clear that these thoughts hold no real power unless they are given attention. It is not the presence of thoughts that creates suffering, but the act of clinging to them. Imagine a beam of light. When diffused, it illuminates broadly but weakly. When concentrated, it becomes a laser, capable of cutting through the hardest surfaces. The mind operates the same way. Scattered attention leads to a scattered life, filled with confusion, hesitation, and missed opportunities. With sustained attention, what once seemed impossible becomes achievable, and what once felt overwhelming becomes manageable. The mind is constantly seeking something to grasp onto, moving from one thought to another like a restless traveler. Left unchecked, it is pulled in every direction by distractions, impulses, and fleeting emotions. But the moment one becomes aware of this movement, there is a choice: to continue drifting aimlessly or to direct attention with purpose. This choice is the foundation of mastery. There is an undeniable connection between attention and experience. A person who fixates on difficulties will find obstacles multiplying before them. Another who directs attention toward possibilities will uncover paths others fail to see. It is not because one is lucky and the other unfortunate. It is because perception follows focus. The mind gathers evidence for whatever it believes to be true. If one believes they are incapable, they will unconsciously seek proof of their limitations. If they believe they are capable, they will naturally find ways to rise. And yet, the most profound aspect of attention is not merely in shaping outcomes, but in shaping the self. The more one focuses on a particular way of being, the more it becomes natural. Confidence is not a trait one is born with, but a state cultivated by directing attention towards strength rather than weakness. Peace is not a gift from the world, but a result of focusing on stillness rather than chaos. Mastering attention is not about rigid control, but about awareness, noticing where the mind wanders, and choosing again and again to return to what truly matters. In this simple act lies the secret to a life lived with intention rather than reaction. Distraction is not an external force that pulls one away from what matters. It is an internal tendency to resist stillness. The mind, by its very nature, is restless. It seeks movement, stimulation, and novelty, mistaking these for fulfillment. When left unchecked, it jumps from one thought to another, never satisfied, always searching. This endless search is not a necessity but a habit, an illusion that something more important is always elsewhere. Most believe distraction is something that happens to them, that the world is filled with interruptions preventing focus. But the truth is, distraction is not an outside disturbance, it is an inner surrender. It is a choice, often made unconsciously, to escape presence. The mind, uncomfortable with silence, invents reasons to wander. Even when nothing calls for attention, it will seek out something to occupy itself. This is not because the present moment lacks value, but because the mind has not yet learned how to rest in it. The illusion of distraction is that it feels necessary. It disguises itself as urgency, convincing one that every passing thought, every fleeting impulse demands attention. And so the mind is led in circles, chasing one thing after another, never settling, never arriving. The more one indulges this pattern, the stronger it becomes. Over time, the ability to focus weakens, not because focus is difficult, but because the habit of avoidance has been strengthened. What many fail to realize is that distraction is not merely an inconvenience. It is a form of self-abandonment. Every moment spent lost in unnecessary thoughts is a moment taken away from true awareness. When one is distracted, they are not fully living, they are merely existing, being carried by whatever thought or impulse appears next. This is why distraction often brings frustration. It gives the illusion of engagement but leaves a feeling of emptiness. But here lies the paradox. The mind believes distraction brings relief, yet in reality it creates tension. The constant shift from one thing to another drains energy, leaving one feeling scattered and unfulfilled. True peace is not found in endless movement, but in stillness. The ability to focus is not about forcing the mind to obey, but about recognizing that nothing outside of this moment holds more importance. The mind will always offer an escape. It will always suggest that something else requires attention, that something is missing. But when one looks deeper, they see that nothing was ever missing. Only the ability to be fully present was lost. And once that presence is reclaimed, distraction loses its grip, revealing itself for what it truly is, an illusion. The mind is a powerful tool, capable of incredible insight and understanding. Yet when left unchecked, it becomes a maze in which one gets lost. Overthinking is not the act of using the mind, but of being used by it. It is a tendency to analyze, dissect, and relive thoughts beyond their usefulness, creating confusion where clarity once existed. What begins as an attempt to solve a problem quickly turns into an endless loop, trapping one in their own thoughts. The illusion of overthinking is that it feels productive. The mind convinces itself that by replaying scenarios, predicting outcomes, and questioning every decision, it is gaining control, but in reality, it is doing the opposite. Overthinking does not provide answers. It multiplies doubts. Instead of moving forward, one becomes stuck in hesitation, unable to act because every possibility seems both right and wrong at the same time. The mind, when given free rein, does not seek peace, it seeks complexity. It will create problems that do not exist just to have something to solve. A simple choice becomes a matter of great importance. A passing comment from another turns into a deep reflection on meaning and intent. The past is replayed as if it can be changed, and the future is feared as if it is already doomed. In this state, life is not lived. It is analyzed to the point of paralysis. But overthinking is not a sign of intelligence. It is a sign of misused energy. True intelligence is the ability to know when to think and when to let go. The most profound insights do not come from excessive thought, but from stillness, from the moments when the mind is quiet enough to see things as they are. Overthinking muddies the water, making everything appear more complicated than it truly is. When the mind is calm, the answers that once seemed distant become obvious. Fear is often the root of overthinking. The fear of making mistakes, the fear of uncertainty, the fear of losing control. The mind believes that by thinking enough, it can eliminate these fears, yet the opposite happens. The more one tries to find absolute certainty, the more uncertain they become. Life was never meant to be understood in its entirety. It was meant to be experienced. Overthinking removes one from experience, keeping them trapped in a world of imagined possibilities rather than real moments. Breaking free from this trap is not about suppressing thoughts, but about recognizing their nature. Thoughts will come and go, but one does not have to follow every single one. Just as a river continues to flow whether one watches it or not, thoughts continue whether they are engaged with or simply observed. The moment one realizes they are not their thoughts, but the awareness behind them, overthinking loses its grip. The mind no longer becomes a prison but a tool, used only when needed and set aside when it is not. There is a vast difference between existing and truly being alive. Most people drift through life lost in thought, unaware of the present moment. They are either tangled in memories of the past or chasing after an imagined future, never fully arriving where they are. Yet life is only ever happening now. The past is but a memory, the future but a concept. And only in presence does one truly experience reality as it is. To be present is to see, hear, and feel without distraction. It is not about emptying the mind, but about being fully engaged with what is unfolding. A simple breath, when noticed, becomes a doorway to stillness. A moment of silence, when embraced, reveals a depth that words cannot capture. Yet presence is elusive because the mind is restless, always seeking something else. It convinces one that fulfillment lies somewhere other than here, keeping them in a cycle of seeking without finding. But what if nothing was missing? What if the wholeness one longs for has always been here, waiting to be noticed? Presence is not something to attain. It is something to return to. It is the space between thoughts, the awareness that remains even when the mind is silent. It is the stillness beneath all movement, the clarity that exists when one is no longer pulled in every direction by distraction. In presence there is no struggle. The weight of unnecessary thinking dissolves, and life unfolds with effortless flow. There is no need to control, no need to chase. The moment is enough. The mind, conditioned to analyze and compare, resists this simplicity. It wants complexity, believing that meaning must be created rather than discovered. But true meaning is found not in thought, but in direct experience. A sunset is not beautiful because one thinks about it. It is beautiful because one sees it. A conversation is not deep because of the words spoken, but because one is fully there to listen. The greatest source of suffering is the belief that something else is needed to be at peace. The mind says, "Once this happens, then I will be happy." But presence reveals that nothing more is needed. Right now, in this very moment, everything is as it should be. Even discomfort, when met with full awareness, loses its power. It is not pain that causes suffering, but resistance to what is. To master presence is not to escape life, but to fully embrace it. Every experience, whether joyful or difficult, becomes an opportunity to wake up from the trance of mindlessness. With presence, life slows down, and the richness of each moment is revealed. The noise of unnecessary thoughts fades, and clarity arises naturally. What once seemed ordinary becomes extraordinary, not because life has changed, but because one is finally here to witness it. Whatever one gives their attention to grows. The mind is like a magnifying glass, intensifying whatever it focuses on. If attention is placed on problems, they seem larger. If it is placed on possibilities, new paths begin to emerge. This is not mere philosophy, but a reflection of how perception shapes reality. The energy of thought, when directed consistently, influences not only one's internal state, but the world they create around them. Most people move through life unaware of where their attention is going. Their focus drifts from one thought to another, shaped by habit rather than intention. Without realizing it, they feed fear, doubt, and limitation simply by constantly thinking about them. Yet just as water nourishes whatever it touches, attention fuels whatever it lingers on. The difference between a life filled with struggle and one filled with growth is often determined by where energy is placed. To understand this deeply, one must observe their own mind. Where does attention go when nothing is demanding it? Does it settle on worries? Does it replay past mistakes? Or does it find its way to gratitude, to opportunity, to what can be built rather than what has been lost? The answers to these questions reveal much about why life feels the way it does. A mind filled with negative focus will see obstacles everywhere, while a mind trained toward purpose will see every challenge as an opportunity. Attention is not just passive observation, it is an act of creation. Whatever one consistently notices, they strengthen. A person who dwells on weakness reinforces it. A person who trains their focus on growth cultivates it. This is why clarity is so important. If attention is scattered, energy is wasted. But if it is directed with intention, even the most difficult goals become achievable. The difference between those who succeed and those who remain stuck is not talent alone, but the ability to keep their energy moving toward what they desire instead of what they fear. Many believe they have no control over their thoughts, that the mind simply moves as it pleases. But attention can be trained, just as a muscle can be strengthened. The more one chooses where to focus, the easier it becomes. This is not about ignoring reality, but about deciding which aspects of reality to energize. Every moment presents a choice, to dwell on limitation or to expand into possibility. The greatest shift in life happens when one realizes that attention is not just something that happens, it is something that can be guided. A mind that wanders aimlessly will produce a life that feels chaotic, but a mind that learns to focus will shape a life filled with purpose. Energy flows where attention goes, and when that truth is mastered, one stops feeling like life is something that happens to them and begins to realize that life is something they are actively creating. Emotions are powerful forces that shape perception, influence decisions, and determine the quality of life. Yet most people allow their emotions to control them rather than learning to direct their emotional energy with intention. Mastering emotional focus is not about suppressing feelings, but about understanding them, guiding them, and using them as a source of strength rather than a source of suffering. The first step in mastering emotional focus is awareness. Many are unaware of how their emotions shift throughout the day. They react impulsively, letting frustration, doubt, or fear dictate their responses. But emotions are not random. They follow patterns. When attention is given to these patterns, one begins to see the triggers that pull them into negativity or lift them into clarity. By observing emotions instead of being consumed by them, one gains the ability to choose their response rather than being controlled by reaction. Emotions, like fire, can either provide warmth or destroy everything in their path. Anger, for example, can lead to destructive actions, or it can be transformed into motivation. Fear can cause paralysis, or it can sharpen awareness and fuel necessary change. The difference lies in how one focuses their emotional energy. Instead of resisting emotions or letting them dictate behavior, mastery comes from channeling them into something constructive. The mind plays a crucial role in shaping emotional focus. The thoughts that are entertained fuel the emotions that are experienced. If attention is placed on resentment, the emotion deepens. If focus is directed towards solutions, even difficult emotions become manageable. The mind and emotions work together, and when one is guided with clarity, the other follows. The key is to shift focus from what drains energy to what strengthens it. Many believe that emotions are outside their control, but emotions respond to where energy is placed. If attention is constantly drawn to the past, feelings of regret or longing take root. If it is projected into the future, anxiety and uncertainty grow. But when focus is brought to the present, emotions stabilize. The more one learns to return to the now, the more they realize that emotions are not the problem, attachment to them is. Emotional mastery does not mean avoiding all negativity. It means understanding that emotions are temporary and choosing not to be swept away by them. Just as the sky remains unchanged regardless of passing clouds, the deeper self remains steady despite changing emotions. When this is understood, emotions no longer dictate life. They become signals, guiding rather than controlling. Those who master emotional focus develop resilience. They do not suppress what they feel, but they also do not dwell in unnecessary suffering. They use emotion as fuel rather than allowing it to consume them. With practice, they learn that the ability to shift focus determines the quality of their emotional state. And when emotional focus is truly mastered, life is no longer something that happens to them. It becomes something they shape with intention. The world is full of noise, not just the sounds that fill the air, but the endless chatter of the mind. Thoughts rush in like waves, pulling attention in every direction, creating a constant hum of distraction. Most people are unaware of this noise because they have lived with it for so long. It becomes the background of their existence, shaping how they see the world, how they feel, and how they respond. Yet, beneath all the noise, there is a stillness, one that can only be found when the unnecessary is quieted. Silencing the noise is not about escaping the world or shutting out life. It is about learning to listen beyond the surface, to find clarity where there was once only confusion. The restless mind feeds on stimulation, always seeking the next thought, the next worry, the next problem to solve. It clings to distractions because stillness feels unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But true awareness begins the moment one stops chasing after every passing thought and simply observes. Attention is often scattered, pulled in countless directions at once. This fragmentation creates exhaustion, a feeling of being overwhelmed without knowing why. Yet, when focus is gathered, energy is restored. Silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of space. Space to think clearly, to feel deeply, to see without distortion. In that space, the mind slows, and what once felt urgent loses its grip. The weight of unnecessary thoughts fades, and what remains is simplicity. Many people search for peace in the outside world, believing it can be found in achievement, recognition, or control. But external conditions will always change. True peace is found when one is no longer at war with their own mind. The noise is not the problem. It is the attachment to it. Thoughts will arise, emotions will shift, but they do not have to be followed. Like clouds passing through the sky, they can be witnessed without being grasped. To silence the noise is to return to what is essential. It is the practice of choosing where to place attention, of letting go of what does not serve. This is not an act of force, but one of awareness. The more one watches their thoughts without getting lost in them, the quieter the noise becomes. It is not about suppressing thoughts, but about no longer being controlled by them. With stillness comes clarity. The mind, no longer clouded by unnecessary distractions, begins to function with greater precision. Problems that once seemed complicated become simple. Answers that felt out of reach begin to emerge naturally. There is no need to force anything, only the need to stop interfering. The deepest wisdom is not found in thinking more, but in thinking less. And when the noise fades, what remains is something far greater than thought. A deep and unwavering presence, free from confusion, open to life as it truly is. The mind is a powerful tool, capable of incredible creativity, problem-solving, and understanding. Yet for many, it does not serve as a tool, but rather acts as a master, dictating emotions, controlling actions, and leading them into endless cycles of worry and doubt. When the mind takes control, life feels chaotic, dominated by thoughts that seem impossible to escape. But the mind was never meant to be the one in charge. It was designed to be used, directed, and guided with intention. Most people believe that their thoughts are who they are. They identify with every idea that arises, every fear that surfaces, every memory that repeats itself. But thoughts are not reality. They are interpretations, reflections, and projections. The mind takes information from the past, compares it with imagined possibilities, and constructs stories that shape how one sees the world. But just because the mind creates a narrative does not mean that narrative is true. A tool can only function properly when it is used correctly, and the same is true for the mind. An untrained mind is restless. It jumps from one thought to the next, reacting to every stimulus, exhausting itself with unnecessary concerns. It pulls attention away from the present moment, dragging it into regrets about the past or worries about the future. But the mind does not have to operate this way. With awareness, it can be refined, disciplined, and put to use, rather than left to run in endless loops of thought. The key to regaining control is understanding that thoughts are not commands. Just because a thought appears does not mean it must be believed or acted upon. A tool does not use itself. It waits for direction. In the same way, the mind must be guided rather than followed blindly. This begins with observation, watching thoughts without immediate reaction. When a thought arises, instead of accepting it as truth, one can question it. Is this thought helpful? Does it bring clarity or confusion? Is it leading toward growth or limitation? In doing so, the mind becomes something to be used rather than something to be obeyed. When the mind is mastered, it becomes a source of strength rather than struggle. It no longer fuels unnecessary fear or doubt, but instead serves as an instrument for creation and insight. It can be directed toward problem-solving, deep reflection, and meaningful action. Instead of working against its owner, it works for them. But this mastery does not happen by force. It happens through awareness. The moment one realizes they are not their thoughts, they regain power over them. A tool is valuable only when it is used with skill. The mind, when left unchecked, leads to confusion, but when sharpened and guided, it becomes the greatest ally. The difference between suffering and wisdom lies not in what the mind produces, but in how it is handled. A master does not serve the tool serves the master. And once this is understood, the mind ceases to be a source of limitation and instead becomes the key to true freedom. Mastering focus is not about eliminating thoughts or suppressing emotions. It is about directing them with intention. The mind is a tool, and when used correctly, it becomes a source of clarity rather than confusion. Distraction is an illusion, overthinking is a trap, and emotional turbulence is a result of misplaced attention. But when awareness is cultivated, the noise fades. Energy flows where attention goes, and those who learn to control their focus shape their reality instead of being shaped by it. True power lies not in controlling everything, but in mastering where the mind is allowed to wander. When the mind serves rather than rules, life becomes an act of creation rather than reaction. Life is not a static painting. It is a river, ever flowing, ever shifting. And yet we spend most of our lives trying to build dams against the inevitable current of change. We cling to the illusion that things should stay the same, that we should stay the same, as if permanence were a virtue rather than a prison. Life is an unfolding process, never static, never still. It moves like the wind through the trees, the tides against the shore, the seasons shifting effortlessly from one into another. And yet, human beings, in their endless craving for control, seek to resist this natural flow. There is a deep longing for permanence, a desperate attempt to hold on to things as they are. But what we call stability is merely an illusion, a fleeting moment mistaken for something solid. Resistance arises from fear, the fear of loss, the fear of uncertainty, the fear that what comes next may not be as comfortable as what exists now. This fear tightens its grip, convincing the mind that clinging is the only way to find peace. But peace is never found in clinging. It is found in movement, in acceptance, in surrendering to the rhythm of life itself. The river does not fight its course. It bends, it shifts, it carves its path through mountains and valleys alike, and in doing so, it finds its way forward. The mind, however, rebels against this truth. It builds walls against the unknown, choosing familiarity over possibility. People hold on to identities that no longer serve them, relationships that have lost their meaning, ideas that no longer reflect reality. They remain in situations that drain them, not because they should, but because they fear the emptiness that might follow if they let go. But life is not meant to be a stagnant pool. It is meant to move, to evolve, to transform. Holding on to what was only delays what is meant to be. The suffering of resistance is subtle at first, a quiet discomfort, a small feeling of unease, but over time it grows heavier. The more one resists, the more life pushes back, demanding change. A person may try to ignore the signs, a sense of restlessness, a growing dissatisfaction, the feeling that something is missing. But life does not cease its motion simply because one refuses to move. Instead, it intensifies the lesson. A job that once felt secure now feels suffocating. A relationship that once brought joy now feels like a cage. An identity that once felt empowering now feels limiting. These are not punishments, but invitations, signs that it is time to shift, to let go, to step into something new. But stepping into the unknown feels like standing on the edge of a vast, endless ocean. The mind whispers that what lies beyond is too unpredictable, too dangerous, too uncertain. It convinces a person that suffering in familiarity is better than freedom in uncertainty. Yet, the very act of resisting what is inevitable creates far greater pain than embracing it ever could. The fear of change is always worse than the change itself. There is a great paradox in all of this. The more one tries to control life, the more life feels uncontrollable. The more one resists change, the more painful it becomes. But the moment one surrenders, the moment one allows the current to take them, there is a strange and unexpected freedom. Suddenly, the weight disappears. The anxiety dissolves. And instead of feeling lost, there is a feeling of being carried, of being guided towards something that was always meant to be. This is the essence of life itself. It does not seek to punish or destroy. It simply seeks to move, to grow, to unfold. And when one learns to move with it, rather than against it, suffering is no longer necessary. Life is not an enemy to be conquered, nor a force to be controlled. It is an experience to be lived fully and completely, without hesitation. People spend their lives building walls around themselves, stacking bricks of routine, comfort, and familiarity, in an attempt to create something unshakable. They believe that stability is the foundation of happiness, that certainty is the key to peace. But what they fail to realize is that nothing in this world is truly stable. What appears solid is always shifting beneath the surface. What seems permanent is, in reality, fleeting. The house built to last forever will one day crumble. The body that feels strong today will inevitably weaken with time. Even the earth itself, which seems so firm underfoot, is constantly moving, shaping, and eroding. Yet the mind clings to the idea that things should stay the same, that once something is gained, it should never be lost. A person secures a job and expects it to last a lifetime. They enter a relationship and assume it will always feel the way it did in the beginning. They carve out an identity, a sense of who they are, and believe that it is fixed, unchanging. But life does not work that way. Life is movement, a continuous unfolding. And anything that stands still for too long begins to decay. The very idea of stability is comforting, but it is also deceptive. It creates expectations that cannot be met. It convinces people that if they follow a certain path, they will be safe from uncertainty. But no amount of planning can prevent change. No amount of preparation can stop life from shifting in ways that are unexpected. And when reality disrupts the illusion, when something once thought to be stable begins to fall apart, suffering follows. The pain is not just from loss, but from the resistance to it. The belief that things were supposed to stay the same. This illusion is reinforced from an early age. People are told to find security in things that are inherently unstable. They are told to chase success as if it guarantees fulfillment, to invest their happiness in relationships as if another person could be a constant source of joy, to define themselves by external achievements as if those things will always remain. But everything in life operates in cycles. What rises must eventually fall. What begins must one day end. And every attempt to hold on to something forever only leads to fear, anxiety, and disappointment. There is an alternative, but it requires a shift in perspective. Instead of seeking stability, one must embrace impermanence. Instead of fearing change, one must recognize it as the very essence of existence. The ocean does not try to hold on to a single wave. It allows each one to come and go, knowing that another will always follow. The tree does not mourn the loss of its leaves in autumn. It understands that new growth will take their place. In the same way, a person who understands the nature of change does not resist it. They do not become attached to circumstances, identities, or external conditions. They remain present, adaptable, and open to whatever life brings. The mind will always crave certainty, but certainty is a myth. No amount of effort can make the uncontrollable controllable. The only real peace comes from accepting the truth that nothing is ever truly stable, and that is exactly how it is meant to be. Growth is not a gentle process. It does not come wrapped in comfort, nor does it arrive when everything is easy. It demands struggle, discomfort, and the willingness to endure what most people spend their lives avoiding. The seed does not simply emerge from the soil. It must break through the earth, stretching towards the light. The muscles do not strengthen without resistance. They must be pushed beyond their limits, torn apart so they can rebuild. The mind does not expand without challenge. It must be forced to question, to unlearn, to see beyond what it once believed to be true. Yet people often seek to grow while avoiding the discomfort that comes with it. They want wisdom without facing the lessons, strength without enduring the weight, transformation without shedding the old self. But life does not work that way. Growth is not an addition, it is a process of refinement, a stripping away of what no longer serves. And that process is rarely comfortable. The greatest periods of growth come when life disrupts the familiar. When a person loses what they once depended on, they are forced to discover a strength they never knew they had. When a dream falls apart, they must reimagine their path in ways they never considered before. When they are pushed into the unknown, they must learn to trust themselves in ways they never thought necessary. It is in these moments, when comfort is stripped away, that the most profound transformation occurs. People often resist discomfort, mistaking it for something to be feared. They avoid difficult conversations, uncertain paths, and unfamiliar challenges because they believe that struggle is a sign that something is wrong. But struggle is not a signal to stop. It is a sign of progress. The caterpillar does not become a butterfly by remaining as it is. It must dissolve, endure the darkness of the cocoon, and fight its way into a new form. Without the struggle, there is no transformation. Without discomfort, there is no evolution. The mind craves ease, but ease does not lead to mastery. A person who never challenges themselves remains trapped in the same patterns, living the same life, thinking the same thoughts. Growth requires stepping into discomfort, willingly facing the unknown, and trusting that even in pain, something valuable is unfolding. The moment discomfort is embraced rather than avoided, something shifts. Fear loses its grip, resistance fades. and in its place a new strength begins to emerge. The greatest mistake is believing that growth should feel good. Growth is not about feeling comfortable. It is about becoming more. It is about allowing oneself to be stretched, tested, and reshaped by experience. And though it may be difficult, though it may come with struggle, there is nothing more rewarding than realizing that through every hardship, something stronger, wiser, and more capable is being forged. People move through life clinging to identities, believing that who they are must be defined by a name, a role, a set of beliefs, or the labels given to them by others. They say, I am this, or I am that, as if identity is a fixed thing, as if it can be held in place like a stone in the river of time. But the truth is, identity is fluid, always shifting, always dissolving and reforming, just as the river never holds the same water twice. Yet, the mind resists this reality. It clings to the comfort of certainty, constructing a sense of self from past experiences, societal roles, and personal narratives. A person calls themselves a teacher, a leader, a healer, a fighter, a survivor. They define themselves by their successes and failures, by their pain and triumphs, by the things they have done and the things that have been done to them. And in this clinging, they build a prison. They become trapped in a version of themselves that may no longer serve them, afraid to let go, afraid to step into the unknown. But identity is not something to be held on to. It is something to be observed, something to be allowed to rise and fall like the waves of the ocean. The child does not cling to childhood. They grow, they change, they become something new. The tree does not resist the loss of its leaves. It sheds them, knowing that in time new growth will take their place. So why then does a person insist on holding on to who they were yesterday, as if change is something to be feared rather than embraced? When one clings too tightly to identity, suffering follows. If they believe they are only valuable because of their achievements, they will fear failure. If they define themselves by their relationships, they will suffer when those relationships change. If they see themselves only as a victim of the past, they will carry that burden long after the moment has passed. In every case, attachment to identity becomes a weight, an anchor that keeps them from flowing with the natural movement of life. But the moment one begins to loosen their grip, something remarkable happens. There is space, space to evolve, space to discover, space to be without needing to define. Instead of saying, I am this, or I am that, they begin to see themselves as something far greater, a presence, an awareness, a being that is not confined by labels. They begin to move through life with a quiet confidence, knowing that they are not the roles they play, not the thoughts they think, not the emotions that pass through them. To detach from identity is not to lose oneself. It is to find freedom. It is to step beyond the narrow definitions imposed by the mind and into a deeper understanding of existence. It is to recognize that nothing is fixed, nothing is permanent, and in that realization, life becomes lighter. There is no need to defend an image, no need to prove anything. There is only the experience of being, fluid, open, and endlessly unfolding. Failure is often seen as something to be feared, avoided, or hidden. People treat it as a mark of shame, a sign that they were not good enough, not smart enough, not strong enough. But this is a misunderstanding. Failure is not an end, nor is it a curse. It is a catalyst. It is the force that pushes one beyond their limits, strips away illusions, and reveals what they are truly capable of becoming. Without failure, there is no growth. Without struggle, there is no transformation. Every person who has ever achieved something meaningful has faced failure. The artist who creates a masterpiece has likely destroyed many imperfect works before it. The masterful musician has endured years of mistakes before they could play effortlessly. The thinker whose ideas changed the world has wrestled with doubt, setbacks, and rejection. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is part of the process, the very foundation on which success is built. Yet the mind resists it. People are conditioned to believe that failure means they have reached a dead end, that it defines them, that it is something to be ashamed of. But failure does not say, this is where you stop. It says, this is where you begin again, wiser than before. When something falls apart, it is not destruction. It is a chance to rebuild in a better way. When a plan does not work, it is not a sign to give up. It is an invitation to refine the approach, to sharpen the vision, to learn something that could not have been learned otherwise. The pain of failure comes not from the experience itself, but from resistance to it. People become lost in their own disappointment, tangled in their fears, worried about what others will think. They mistake failure for defeat rather than seeing it as a teacher. But failure is never wasted if it is understood. Every setback holds a lesson. Every mistake points toward a deeper truth. And every moment of disappointment carries within it the potential for something greater. Some of the most profound transformations come from the lowest points. When a person is stripped of all certainty, when they feel as though they have lost everything, they are often closer to real change than ever before. Because failure forces a choice: either remain broken or rebuild stronger, either cling to old ways or adapt, evolve, and rise again. The fire that destroys also purifies. The pressure that crushes also forms diamond. A person who embraces failure rather than fearing it becomes unstoppable. They do not hesitate in the face of uncertainty. They do not crumble when things do not go as planned. Instead, they adjust, they learn, they grow. They understand that failure is not there to break them, but to shape them. And once that truth is accepted, failure loses its power to create fear. It becomes nothing more than a step, a necessary part of the journey, a force that pushes one towards something greater than they ever imagined. People spend much of their lives holding on, gripping tightly to expectations, relationships, past regrets, and future desires. They believe that by clinging they can control, by grasping they can secure what they seek. But life does not work that way. The tighter one holds, the more they suffer. The more they resist change, the more they are trapped by it. It is only in letting go that one creates the space to receive. Letting go is not giving up. It is not a loss. It is an understanding that attachment creates tension, while release allows for flow. A clenched fist cannot take in more. Only an open hand can receive. The river does not struggle to hold on to the water that flows through it, nor does the tree resist the changing of seasons. They move in harmony with life, trusting that what is meant to come will come, and what is meant to go will go. Yet the mind resists, convinces people that they must control everything, that they must hold on to their plans, their identities, their version of how life should unfold. When things do not go as expected, they feel betrayed. They fight against reality, trying to force circumstances to match their desires. But the harder they push, the more exhausted they become. They mistake attachment for strength, not realizing that true strength lies in surrender. Letting go is not passive. It is an act of deep trust, a willingness to step into the unknown without fear. It means releasing the past, not erasing it, but no longer allowing it to define the present. It means loosening the grip on expectations, allowing life to unfold in ways that may not have been planned, but are often far more meaningful. It means understanding that no person, no situation, no outcome can be possessed. Everything is borrowed, and in time, everything changes. When one lets go, they do not lose. They gain. They gain peace, no longer tormented by what could have been. They gain clarity, free from the distortions of fear and control. They gain opportunities that were once hidden behind the walls of resistance. In release, there is space for something new to arrive, something unexpected, something far greater than what was once clung to. The person who lets go moves with life rather than against it. They do not force, they allow. They do not grasp, they trust. And in that trust, they find that everything they once chased, everything they once struggled for, begins to arrive effortlessly. Because life does not respond to force, it responds to openness. And only when one lets go do they finally make room to receive. The unknown is feared because it cannot be controlled. The mind clings to certainty, to familiar patterns, to what is known and understood. It seeks comfort in the predictable, believing that safety lies in what has already been mapped out. But life does not move in straight lines. It twists, it turns, it unfolds in ways that no one can fully anticipate. And to resist this is to resist life itself. There is a quiet truth woven into existence. Nothing stays the same. No moment can be repeated. No path can be fully foreseen. The river does not know where it will bend next, yet it moves forward without hesitation. The seed does not demand to know how tall it will grow. It simply roots itself in the soil and allows nature to take its course. The bird does not wait for guarantees before it takes flight. It trusts the sky will hold it. Yet people hesitate. They stand at the edge of change, afraid to take the next step unless they can see the entire path before them. They delay decisions, waiting for absolute certainty, fearing failure, fearing loss, fearing that the unknown may bring suffering. But in this hesitation, they remain stuck, trapped in the illusion that certainty is necessary for progress. The unknown is not an enemy. It is the birthplace of all growth, all discovery, all transformation. Everything that has ever been achieved, everything that has ever been created, first existed as something uncertain, something unfamiliar, something yet to be explored. Every new experience, every moment of joy, every profound realization was once an unknown waiting to be embraced. To fear the unknown is to reject the very essence of life, which is movement, change, and possibility. When one steps into the unknown, they do not enter chaos, they enter potential. They free themselves from the limitations of their past experiences, their conditioned fears, their rigid expectations. They become open to new ways of seeing, new ways of being. They begin to trust, not in fixed plans, but in their ability to adapt, to learn, to navigate whatever arises. They stop demanding certainty and start embracing curiosity. The unknown is where one discovers who they truly are, not in the repetition of old patterns, but in the moments where they are stretched beyond them, in the space where they must think, act, and grow in ways they never have before. It is in uncertainty that they find their strength, their resilience, their creativity. It is in the unfamiliar that they awaken to life's deepest truths. To embrace the unknown is not to abandon all caution, nor is it to act recklessly. It is simply to trust that life unfolds in ways beyond what the mind can predict. It is to welcome the unexpected, to loosen the grip on rigid plans, to walk forward with openness rather than fear, because it is only when one releases the need for certainty that they truly begin to live. People spend their lives chasing after something, success, love, wisdom, fulfillment, always believing that they are incomplete, that they must become something greater than what they are. They measure themselves against ideals, against imagined versions of who they think they should be, always striving, always reaching, never arriving. But the search itself is an illusion. There is no destination to reach, no final point where one suddenly becomes complete, because one is not separate from the process. One is the process. Everything in existence is in motion, constantly unfolding, constantly changing. The river does not flow towards some final point where it becomes a river. It is the river in its movement. The tree does not wait to become a tree. It is already the process of growing, shedding, and blooming. The sky does not struggle to be the sky. It simply is, shifting through seasons, through storms and stillness. And yet, people resist this truth within themselves. They believe they must struggle to become something, rather than realizing they are already in the midst of becoming. There is no moment where one suddenly arrives at perfection, no point where all flaws are erased, all uncertainty disappears, all questions are answered. The idea of a finished self is an illusion, a false promise that keeps people chasing, waiting, doubting. But life does not work that way. The self is not a fixed object. It is a flowing current. To live is to change, to move, to evolve. One is not a static being trying to reach completion, but a process unfolding in real time, moment by moment. Yet the mind resists. It clings to definitions, to labels, to fixed identities. It wants certainty, a clear sense of arrival, a final answer. But reality does not provide such things. The search for completion only creates more struggle because it assumes something is missing. But nothing is missing. The process itself is the fulfillment. The act of learning, of growing, of experiencing. This is what it means to be alive. There is no final version of the self waiting in the future. There is only the self that exists now, in movement, in transition, in exploration. When one truly understands this, the burden of expectation dissolves. There is no need to chase, no need to force, no need to judge oneself against an imagined standard. There is only the process of becoming, which is already happening, whether one resists it or flows with it. The tree does not hurry its growth. The river does not resist its course. They simply are, not in a state of completion, but in a state of being, and that is enough. A person who understands they are already the process no longer fears change, no longer sees imperfection as failure. They do not wait to be ready, to be perfect, to be complete. They understand that they are always in motion, always evolving. And in that realization they find peace, not in the illusion of arrival, but in the acceptance that they were never meant to be anything other than exactly what they are, right now, in this moment. The search for completeness, the fear of the unknown, the resistance to change. All of these are illusions that keep one trapped in struggle. But life does not wait for permission to unfold. It moves, it transforms, and it carries everything along with it. There is no final destination, no fixed identity to achieve, no certainty to grasp. There is only the process, the endless becoming, the continuous flow. To resist is to suffer, to cling is to stagnate. But to embrace the movement, to let go, to trust in the unfolding, This is freedom. This is where life is truly lived.